I am 48 years old. For 25 of those years, I was a wife. I thought I was a happy one. My husband, Mark, and I had built a life together. We had a home, we had friends, we had a son, Alex, who was the center of my world. The party was for us, a celebration of a quarter of a century. The house was filled with people we knew, faces that had watched us grow from a young couple into a family. Laughter echoed in the living room. Glasses clinked. Mark stood up to make a toast. He held his champagne flute high. Everyone quieted down, smiling at him. At us, I smiled too. I felt a warmth in my chest, a sense of deep contentment. I looked at Alex, who was standing near the fireplace, talking to his cousin. He caught my eye and gave me a small, proud smile. He was 24, a man, really, but he would always be my little boy. Mark cleared his throat. He started with the usual things. He thanked everyone for coming. He spoke about the day we met. He told a funny story about our first apartment and the broken furnace. People chuckled. I felt my own smile widen. These were our stories. This was our life. He then looked directly at me. His expression changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The warmth in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by something hard and cold. It was like a mask dropping for a split second. I felt a tiny prickle of unease. To Clara, he said, his voice steady. My wife of 25 years. He paused. The room was perfectly silent, waiting for the loving conclusion. I held my breath. She has given me many things over the years. Another pause. This one felt longer. It felt heavy. I saw Alex shift his weight, his smile fading into a look of confusion. Mark's eyes never left mine. They were like chips of ice. But there is one thing I must be honest about, he continued, his voice ringing with a strange, theatrical gravity. A truth I have carried for too long. My heart started to beat faster. A low, dull thud against my ribs. What was he doing? This was not part of the plan. This was not a toast. It was an execution. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. Our son, he said, his voice dropping but carrying to every corner of the silent room. Alex, he isn't yours. The world stopped. The air in the room turned to glass, fragile and sharp. Every smile was frozen in place. The laughter died in people's throats. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes shifting from Mark to me. I could feel their shock, their pity, their sudden, hungry curiosity. My own body went numb. I could not feel the chair beneath me. I could not feel the stem of the champagne glass in my hand. The only thing I could feel was the searing heat of humiliation. He had done this here, in front of everyone, in front of our son. I looked at Alex. His face was white. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide with disbelief and a pain so raw it felt like a physical blow. He looked at me, then at his father, then back at me. He was searching for an answer, a denial, anything to make this stop. My mind was a roaring storm of white noise. I could not think. I could not breathe. But through the noise, one thought broke through, clear and sharp as a shard of ice. He wanted to destroy me. This was not about a secret. This was about destruction. Mark stood there holding his pose, a conquering hero in his own twisted drama. His mother, Eleanor, who was seated near the front, had a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She knew. She was part of this. That single, vicious smile cut through my shock and ignited something else. A cold, hard rage. It started in my gut and spread through my veins, pushing out the numbness, clearing the fog from my mind. He wanted a reaction. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene. He would not get it. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I placed my champagne glass on the table beside me with a steady hand. The small click was unnaturally loud in the dead silence. I rose to my feet. I did not look at the guests. I did not look at Alex. I looked only at my husband of 25 years, the man who had just tried to burn my world to the ground. I let the silence stretch for another few seconds, letting him feel the weight of what he had done, letting everyone see him for what he was. Then I spoke. My voice was calm. It was even. It did not shake. "You're right," I said. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Mark's confident posture wavered for a fraction of a second. This was not the response he had expected. He had expected a denial, a hysterical outburst. He had not expected agreement. I saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I let my gaze sweep over him, cold and dismissive. I held his stare. "He's not yours," I finished. "He's mine." The confusion on Mark's face deepened. The guests murmured, their heads turning to one another. What did that mean? I had turned his accusation on its head. I had taken his weapon and twisted it. He had tried to paint me as an unfaithful wife. I had just implied something else entirely, something he had not prepared for. The smug look on Eleanor's face vanished, replaced by a scowl. I had ruined their moment. I had stolen their victory. I turned and walked toward my son. Alex was still frozen, his face a mask of turmoil. I put my hand on his arm. His muscles were tense. "Let's go," I said softly, my voice for him alone. He looked at me, his eyes filled with 1,000 questions. He nodded numbly. I did not look back at Mark. I did not look at his mother. I did not look at our friends and family, who were now whispering openly. I kept my head high. I led my son out of the living room, through the hall, and out the front door, leaving the ruins of our 25-year anniversary party behind us. The cold night air felt like a relief. I had not won. Not yet. But I had survived the first blow, and I had drawn a new line in the sand. The war had just begun. The car ride home was silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with everything that had not been said. I drove. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my insides were a tangled mess of fury and fear. Alex sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark houses rushing by. I wanted to say something, to reassure him, but the words would not come. What could I possibly say to fix this? His father had just detonated a bomb in the middle of his life. When we got home, he went straight to his room without a word. I heard his door click shut. The sound was like a final judgment. I stood alone in the hallway of the house that suddenly felt cold and foreign. This was my home. I had decorated every room. I had chosen the paint colors. I had raised my son here. Now it felt like a stage for a play I no longer had a part in. A car pulled into the driveway. "Mark," I braced myself. The front door opened and he walked in, his face a thundercloud. He slammed the door behind him. "What was that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I turned to face him. The rage I had suppressed at the party came rushing back. "What was that?" I repeated, my voice shaking this time, not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated anger. "You dare to ask me that? You stood up in front of our friends, our family, our son, and you tried to annihilate me. For what, Mark? What was the point of that spectacle?" "The point was the truth," he spat, his eyes burning with a self-righteous fire. "Something you seem to have forgotten a long time ago." "The truth?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You wouldn't know the truth if it bit you. That wasn't about truth. That was about cruelty. You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to hurt me in the most public way possible. And you used our son to do it." "Our son," he scoffed. "That's the whole point, isn't it, Clara? He's not our son." My mind was racing. What did he mean? The words at the party, his accusation, it was all built on a lie. Alex was his son. I had never been with another man. Not once in our entire marriage. I knew that with a certainty that was as real as the floor under my feet. So what was this? Was he insane? Had he lost his mind? What are you talking about? I asked, my voice dropping. I needed to understand. I needed to know what I was fighting against. Alex is your son. You were there. You held him moments after he was born. You cried. Have you forgotten that? I remember what I was told, he said, his voice laced with venom. I remember a lie I believed for 24 years. It's over, Clara. The lying is over. He was convinced, utterly and completely convinced. This was not a sudden fit of madness. This was something he believed, something he had been led to believe. My eyes narrowed. Eleanor. Her smug smile at the party. This had her fingerprints all over it. She had never thought I was good enough for her precious son. She had spent 25 years making small, cutting remarks, undermining me at every turn. But this was a new level of poison. Who told you this? I demanded. Who has been filling your head with these lies? Was it your mother? Mark's face hardened. My mother has nothing to do with this. This is about you and me, and what you did. He was protecting her. Of course he was. He was always her perfect, loyal son. I did nothing, I said, my voice low and firm. This is where it starts. I am not defending myself. I am challenging him. You are the one who is making these wild accusations. You are the one who blew up our family. So you are the one who needs to provide some proof. Where is it, Mark? Show me this proof that has convinced you to throw away our entire life. He hesitated. For the first time since he stood up to make that toast, he looked uncertain. He had expected me to break down, to confess to something I had never done. He had not expected me to stand my ground and demand evidence. I don't need to show you anything, he said, puffing out his chest again, trying to regain his footing. I know. That's all that matters. It's not all that matters, I shot back. It matters to Alex. It matters to the life we built. You have made an accusation that could destroy our son. You don't get to do that based on a feeling. You don't get to hide behind I know. So I'll ask you again. Where is your proof? He stared at me, his jaw tight. The silence stretched between us. He had nothing. I could see it in his eyes. He had no proof. He had a story. A lie fed to him by his mother, whispered in his ear until he believed it was his own discovery. He had nothing but suspicion and malice, and he had used it to try and ruin me. Get out, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He blinked. What? Get out of my house, I said, pointing toward the door. You are not welcome here, not after what you did. You can go stay with your mother. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to have you. Your house? He sputtered, his face turning red. This is my house, too. Not tonight it isn't, I said. Tonight you are the man who publicly disowned his son for sport. You don't get to sleep here. Get your things and go. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing. He was used to me backing down. He was used to me being the peacemaker. He was not used to this. He was not used to me setting a boundary and holding it. He saw the look in my eyes. He saw that I was not bluffing. With a final furious glare, he turned, stormed up the stairs, and a few minutes later, came back down with an overnight bag. He wrenched the front door open. This isn't over, he snarled. No, I said as the door slammed shut behind him. It's not. I locked the deadbolt. The click echoed in the silent house. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and finally let out the breath I felt like I had been holding for hours. The adrenaline started to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. But beneath the exhaustion, there was a flicker of something else, a steely resolve. He had started this war, but I was going to finish it. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were shaking now. I needed to talk to someone. I needed a friendly voice. I pulled out my phone and dialed my best friend, Sarah. She answered on the second ring. Clara? What happened? People are leaving your party saying the most insane things, she said, her voice a mixture of concern and confusion. Tears pricked my eyes. Hearing her voice, a voice of sanity in this madness, was almost enough to make me break. It's true, Sarah, I whispered. He did it. He stood up and said Alex wasn't his. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Oh, Clara, she finally breathed. I am so sorry. Are you okay? Where is Alex? He's in his room. He won't talk to me, I said, my voice cracking. Mark just left. I kicked him out. Good, she said, her voice firm. Good for you. He had no right. What on earth possessed him? I don't know, I said, sinking into a kitchen chair. He's convinced. He says he knows, but he has no proof. I think it's Eleanor. I think she's behind this. Of course she is, Sarah said without hesitation. She's been trying to drive a wedge between you two for years. This is her masterpiece, her grand finale. We talked for a long time. Sarah listened as I went over every detail of the evening. She let me rage. She let me cry. She didn't offer easy platitudes. She just listened. And when I was done, when I had nothing left to say, she spoke. So what are you going to do? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath. I'm going to find out why, I said. This isn't just about a lie. This is about something bigger. There's a reason he did this now, after 25 years. There's a reason he did it so publicly. I need to know what it is. And then, I'm going to make them pay. How? She asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'll start with Alex. I need to talk to him. I need him to know that no matter what, I'm his mother and I love him. He knows that, Clara, Sarah said gently. He's just in shock. Give him a little time. And call me tomorrow. Call me anytime. You are not alone in this. We said our goodbyes and I hung up. I felt a little stronger. A little less alone. I walked upstairs and stood outside Alex's door. I could see a line of light from under it. He was awake. I knocked softly. Alex? I said. Can I come in? There was a long pause. Then I heard his voice, quiet and muffled. Yeah. I opened the door and stepped inside. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, his shoulders slumped. He didn't look at me. The room was filled with his life. His books, his guitar, posters on the wall from his high school band. A life that Mark had just tried to erase. I sat down in the chair by his desk, facing him. I am so sorry, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry that he did that to you. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were red. Is it true? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. My heart broke. That was the question that mattered. That was the poison Mark had planted in his mind. No, I said, my voice firm and clear. It is not true. You are his son. I have never, ever been with anyone else. Your father is mistaken. He's been listening to lies. Alex searched my face, looking for any hint of deception. He found none. He let out a long, shuddering breath and scrubbed a hand over his face. Then why would he say that? He asked, his voice full of pain. In front of everyone? Why would he want to hurt us like that? That's what I'm going to find out, I said. I leaned forward, trying to impress the urgency and sincerity of my words upon him. Listen to me, Alex. Your father and I, we are going to have some problems to sort through. This is going to be hard. But none of it, not one single part of it, is your fault. Do you understand me? He nodded, but he still looked lost. He looked so sure. He mumbled. I know, I said. And that's the scary part. Someone has worked very hard to make him sure. Your grandmother, I think. Alex's head snapped up. Grandma Eleanor? I saw her face, Alex, I said. She was smiling when he said it. She was enjoying it. A look of dawning comprehension, followed by disgust, crossed his face. He had always had a difficult relationship with his grandmother. She was constantly comparing him to Mark, pushing him to be more like his father, finding fault with his choices. He was never quite good enough for her. "So what do we do?" he asked. His voice was a little stronger now. He had said we, not you. We. A tiny spark of hope ignited in my chest. We were still a team. "For now, we stick together," I said. "And we don't let them divide us. That's what they want. They want you to doubt me. They want me to be isolated. We can't let that happen." I paused. Then I made a decision. It was time to be completely honest with him. "Alex, your father might demand things. He might demand a test." He flinched. The word hung in the air between us. A DNA test. The ultimate proof. The very idea was an insult, a violation. "If he does," I continued, my voice steady, "I will not fight it. Because I have nothing to hide. And I want this lie to be exposed for what it is. But I need you to know, no matter what some piece of paper says, you are my son. Nothing will ever change that. Do you believe me?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. A real nod this time. A flicker of his old self returned to his eyes. "I believe you, Mom," he said. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. "Good," I said, managing a small smile. "That's all I need." I stood up to leave. As I reached the door, he spoke again. "Mom?" I turned back. "He's wrong about you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "And I'm going to help you prove it." I went to my room that night not with a sense of peace, but with a sense of purpose. The battle lines were drawn. I had my son by my side, and I was ready to fight. The next morning, I woke up with a cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. The shock had worn off, replaced by a sharp, focused anger. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. I needed a plan. Mark and Eleanor had been planning their attack for who knows how long. I was starting from scratch. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "We need to talk. I'll be there in an hour with my mother." My jaw tightened. With his mother. Of course. He couldn't even face me alone. He needed his mommy to hold his hand. And he wasn't asking. He was telling. The arrogance was breathtaking. I typed back a simple reply. "No." A few seconds later, my phone rang. It was him. I let it ring 4 times, then I answered. "What do you mean, no?" he demanded without even a hello. "I mean no," I said calmly. "You are not coming to this house. And you are certainly not bringing your mother with you. If you want to talk, we can meet somewhere neutral. A coffee shop. A park." "Don't be ridiculous, Clara," he snapped. "This is a family matter. We will discuss it at home." "This stopped being a family matter when you made it a public spectacle," I retorted. "And this is my home now. You lost your right to walk in here whenever you please. So you can either agree to meet me on my terms, or we can have our next conversation through our lawyers. Your choice." There was a stunned silence on his end. I could hear Eleanor's voice in the background, sharp and angry. "What is she saying? Tell her to stop being hysterical." Mark came back on the line, his voice flustered. "Fine. The coffee shop on Main Street. 1 hour." He hung up before I could reply. I smiled. A small, cold victory. I had set the terms. I was not the hysterical, weeping wife he expected me to be. I was a problem he hadn't anticipated. I went to Alex's room and knocked. "I'm going to meet your father," I said when he opened the door. "And your grandmother will likely be there." He frowned. "Do you want me to come with you?" I was touched by the offer, but I shook my head. "No, this is something I need to do alone. I need to see what they want. I need to understand their game. You just stay here. Lock the door after I leave. Don't let them in if they try to come here afterwards." He nodded, his expression serious. Be careful, Mom. I will, I promised. I chose my outfit carefully. Not a suit of armor, but something that projected quiet confidence. A simple dark blue dress. I put on a little makeup. I wanted to look composed. I wanted to look like a woman who was not going to be broken. When I walked into the coffee shop, they were already there, sitting at a small table in the corner. Mark looked tense, his fingers drumming on the tabletop. Eleanor sat ramrod straight, a look of sour disapproval on her face. She was wearing an expensive coat and perfectly coiffed hair, the very picture of a wealthy matriarch. She looked me up and down as I approached, her eyes critical. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I am so sorry you're going through this. It must be so difficult." I ignored her and looked at Mark. "You wanted to talk," I said, sitting down. I did not order anything. I was not here to socialize. "Yes," Mark said, leaning forward. "This has gone far enough. Last night was unfortunate, but it was necessary." "Necessary for what?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "To get to the truth," Eleanor cut in, unable to stay silent. "Mark has been worried for a long time. A mother knows these things. I could see the toll it was taking on him." "Is that right?" I said, turning my gaze to her. "And what exactly was he worried about, Eleanor?" She gave me a pitying look. "About Alex, dear. About his origins." The condescension in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife. "My son's origins are not a mystery," I said, my voice hardening. "He was born at St. Mary's Hospital on May 12th. You were there. You brought him a silver rattle that he never played with." Eleanor's lips thinned. "Don't be difficult, Clara. You know what I mean. Mark deserves to know if the boy who carries his name is actually his. The boy who carries his name." There it was again. Legacy. Name. This was about bloodlines and inheritance. Sarah was right. "Then he should have asked me," I said, turning back to Mark. "He should have come to me in private and shared his concerns. He should not have ambushed me and our son at our anniversary party." "I tried to talk to you," Mark exclaimed, his voice rising. People at nearby tables glanced over. "I tried to bring it up, but you always shut me down." This was a blatant lie. He had been distant and moody for months, but he had never once mentioned anything about Alex's paternity. He was creating a false history to justify his actions. "That is not true, Mark, and you know it," I said calmly. "You have been angry and secretive, but you never said a word about this. This whole thing came out of nowhere." "It came from 24 years of doubt," he insisted. I felt a surge of weariness. This was pointless. He was in too deep. He was living in a fiction created by his mother. Arguing with him was like arguing with a brick wall. I needed to change tactics. I needed information. "Okay," I said, holding up a hand. "Let's say I believe you. Let's say you've had these doubts. Why now? Why on our 25th anniversary? What was so urgent that it had to be done in the most destructive way imaginable?" Mark and Eleanor exchanged a look. A quick, almost imperceptible glance. But I saw it. There was something they weren't telling me. A deadline. A reason for the sudden urgency. "Because it was time," Mark said, his voice evasive. "It had been long enough." "That's not an answer," I said, pressing him. "What happened to make it time? Did you find some new information? Did someone tell you something?" "We have information," Eleanor said smugly. "We have reason to believe that Alex is not Mark's son." "What information?" I demanded. "Show it to me. If you have proof, put it on the table. Right now." Again, they hesitated. They had nothing. It was all a bluff. They were trying to bully me into a confession. "It's a private matter," Eleanor said dismissively. "It's not something to be aired in a coffee shop." "You were happy enough to air it at a party with 50 guests," I shot back. The hypocrisy was stunning. I looked at Mark. His face was a mixture of anger and anxiety. He was out of his depth. He was a puppet, and his mother was pulling the strings. "This is what is going to happen," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "You have made a very serious accusation. You have hurt our son deeply. You have publicly humiliated me. And you have done it all without a shred of evidence. So you have two choices. You can either publicly retract your statement and apologize to me and to Alex, or you can prove your claim. And I mean real proof, Mark. A DNA test." Mark flinched at the words. Eleanor, however, looked pleased. This was what she wanted. A test that would, in her mind, prove her right and destroy me for good. "A test is an excellent idea," she said smoothly. "It will clear the air for everyone." "Fine," I said, looking directly at Mark. "We'll do the test. All three of us. Me, you, and Alex. We'll go to a reputable lab. We'll do it by the book. And when the results come back and prove that you are his father, you will apologize. In public. And you will spend the rest of your life making it up to your son." Mark stared at me, his expression unreadable. He seemed almost scared. What was he afraid of? That he was right? Or that he was wrong? "And if the test proves you're a liar?" Eleanor sneered. "Then I will walk away with nothing," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I will sign whatever papers you want. I will disappear. But we both know that's not going to happen, don't we, Eleanor?" I stood up. "I will have my lawyer contact you to arrange the details of the test. Do not contact me directly again. And do not, under any circumstances, try to contact Alex." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving them sitting in a stunned silence. My heart was pounding. I had called their bluff. I had agreed to the one thing they thought I would fear the most. But as I walked to my car, a new, unsettling thought began to form in my mind. What if they knew something I didn't? What if there was some secret about Alex's birth that I was unaware of? It seemed impossible. But their confidence, Eleanor's smug certainty, it was unnerving. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. The way Mark and Eleanor had exchanged that look, the urgency. It wasn't just about a 25-year-old lie. It was about something happening now. When I got home, Alex was waiting in the living room, pacing back and forth. "How did it go?" he asked, his eyes wide with anxiety. "I called their bluff," I said, sinking onto the sofa. "I agreed to a DNA test." Alex stopped pacing and stared at me. "Mom, you don't have to do that. We don't have to prove anything to them." "I know," I said, sighing. "But it's the only way to end this. It's the only way to shut them up for good. We get the test, it proves your dad is your dad, and they have to crawl back into whatever hole they came from." "And if they don't?" he asked quietly. "What if they just say the test is fake? What if they just keep lying?" That was a good question. A very good question. They weren't rational. They were driven by malice. "Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "But for now, this is our best move." I spent the rest of the day on the phone with my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Catherine. I explained the situation. She was appalled, but not surprised. "This reeks of a financial motive," she said after I described the conversation with Mark and Eleanor. "A public accusation of infidelity, a challenge to the legitimacy of the heir. This is classic groundwork for a contentious divorce where they try to leave you with nothing. Is there a family trust? A large inheritance?" "I think so," I said, the word legacy echoing in my mind. Mark's father was very wealthy. He owned a large commercial real estate company. Mark and his brother David inherited it. But I know there are trusts and complicated financial structures. Mark never liked to talk about the details. "Well, it's time to start talking about them," Catherine said. "I want you to find any paperwork you can. Bank statements, trust documents, wills, anything." The why now is almost always about money. Your husband's sudden urgency is a huge red flag. After the call, I went to our home office. It was a room I rarely used. It was Mark's domain. The shelves were lined with his business books and sailing trophies. The desk was large and imposing. I started opening drawers. Most of them were filled with mundane paperwork: bills, insurance policies, old tax returns. But in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, tucked away in the back, I found a thick leather-bound folder. The label on it read, Westwood Family Trust. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. The document was dense with legal jargon, but I started to read, my eyes scanning for anything that might be relevant. And then I found it. A specific clause, deep within the document. The paternity proviso. My blood ran cold. The clause stated that for a child to be considered a legitimate heir and beneficiary of the main trust fund, their paternity must be unquestioned and verifiable. If a child's paternity was successfully challenged, they would be disinherited, and their share of the trust would revert to the other beneficiaries. But there was more. A second clause, even more shocking. It stated that if a primary beneficiary, Mark or his brother David, were to be found to have knowingly raised a non-biological heir, they would be in breach of the trust's terms. Their own access to the funds could be frozen, pending a review by the trustees. The trustees were listed. The first name on the list was Eleanor Westwood. I sat back in the chair, the papers shaking in my hand. It all made sense. The public spectacle, the urgency, the supreme confidence. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They were trying to disinherit my son. And by claiming Mark had been deceived for all these years, they were trying to protect his own stake in the trust. This was a coup. A meticulously planned financial coup. But something still didn't add up. Why now? The trust had been in place since Mark's father died 10 years ago. Why the sudden move? I kept reading. I found a section about the trust's distribution schedule. There was a major payout scheduled, a very large one. It was scheduled for Mark's 50th birthday, which was in 2 weeks. My breath caught in my throat. The deadline. That was the deadline. They had to legally challenge Alex's paternity and have him disinherited before Mark's birthday. That's why they couldn't wait. That's why they had to act, even if it meant blowing up the family in such a brutal public way. I felt a wave of nausea. This was so much colder and more calculated than I could have ever imagined. This was not about a hurt husband's suspicions. This was about greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. They were willing to destroy Alex, to brand him as illegitimate, to take away his birthright, all for a bigger piece of the pie. I closed the folder. The cold rage from the party returned, but this time it was different. It was icy. It was focused. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated me. They thought I would crumble. They thought I was just a wife, a mother. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I picked up my phone. I needed more information. I needed an ally. There was only one person who might be willing to help me. One person who hated Eleanor's control as much as I did. Mark's brother, David. He and Mark had a strained relationship. David was the artistic one, the one who had never quite lived up to his father's expectations. He ran a small gallery in the city and had always kept his distance from the family drama. Eleanor treated him with a kind of weary disappointment. I found his number in my contacts and hesitated for a moment. What if he sided with his brother? What if he was part of the plan? But my gut told me he wasn't. David had always been kind to me and to Alex. He had a sense of fairness that Mark and Eleanor completely lacked. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. He answered on the third ring. Clara, is everything all right? His voice was cautious. The news of the party must have reached him. No, David, it's not, I said. I need to talk to you. It's about Mark and your mother. There was a pause. Okay, he said slowly. Where? Somewhere private, I said. This is serious. We agreed to meet the next day at his art gallery before it opened to the public. I didn't tell Alex where I was going. I didn't want to give him false hope. This was a long shot, but it was the only one I had. The gallery was a bright, airy space in a trendy part of the city. It was filled with bold, modern paintings. It felt a world away from the stuffy, traditional atmosphere of Mark and Eleanor's life. David was waiting for me by the door. He looked worried. He was a softer version of Mark, with kinder eyes and a less rigid posture. "Clara," he said, giving me a brief, awkward hug. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "I can't believe he would do that." "I can," I said grimly. "Or at least I'm starting to. David, I need your help. I need you to be honest with me. What do you know about the Westwood Family Trust?" He stiffened. His friendly demeanor evaporated, replaced by a guarded look. "That's complicated. Why are you asking about that?" "Because I found the paperwork," I said, watching him closely. "I found the paternity proviso. I know what they're trying to do to Alex." David let out a long, heavy sigh and ran a hand through his hair. He looked defeated. "I was afraid of this," he muttered. "I knew Mother was up to something." "What did you know?" I pressed. He led me to a small office in the back of the gallery and closed the door. "She's been talking about it for months," he said, his voice low. "About securing the legacy. About making sure the money went to true Westwoods. I thought it was just her usual nonsense. I never thought Mark would actually go along with it." "He's not just going along with it, David. He's leading the charge," I said. "They are trying to disinherit Alex before Mark's 50th birthday. There's a big payout coming, isn't there?" He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "The final distribution from our father's personal estate. It's significant." "And if Alex is out, his share goes to you and Mark?" He nodded again, looking ashamed. "Yes, it would be split between us." Suddenly, his reluctance made sense. He stood to gain financially from this. My heart sank. What if I had made a terrible mistake in coming here? "I don't want it," he said suddenly, looking up at me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, you have to believe me. I never wanted any part of this. Alex is my nephew. I love him. The thought of them doing this to him makes me sick." I searched his face, looking for the truth. And I saw it. He was genuinely distressed. He was trapped, just in a different way than I was. "Then help me," I said, my voice quiet but intense. "Help me stop them. There has to be a way. This whole thing is based on a lie. Alex is Mark's son. A DNA test will prove it." David shook his head slowly. "It might not be that simple," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, a cold dread creeping up my spine. "The trustees," he said. "My mother is the head trustee. She has a lot of power. She can challenge the results. She can drag this out in court for years. By the time it's settled, the deadline for the distribution will have passed. She doesn't need to win. She just needs to run out the clock." I felt the room start to spin. Of course, it was an even more devious plan than I had realized. They didn't need proof. They just needed the accusation. The challenge itself was the weapon. "So what do I do?" I whispered, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. "Is there nothing I can do?" David was silent for a long moment, staring at a painting on the wall. He seemed to be wrestling with a decision. "There might be something," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "But it's the nuclear option. And I don't know if I have the courage to do it." "Do what?" I asked, leaning forward. "David, whatever it is, you have to tell me. They are trying to destroy my son." He looked at me, his eyes full of a strange mixture of fear and resolve. "It's not about Alex's paternity," he said. "It's about Mark's." I stared at him, completely bewildered. "What are you talking about?" "My father," David said, his voice trembling slightly. "He had his suspicions. About my mother. He never said anything to me directly, but after he died, I found something." In his private safe. My heart started to pound. What did you find? A letter, he said. It was from a doctor, a specialist in genetics. My father had a rare genetic marker, a harmless one, but very distinct. He had himself tested, and he had me tested when I was a child. The marker passed from him to me. He paused, taking a shaky breath. But Mark was tested too, and he doesn't have it. The world tilted on its axis. I could not process what he was saying. It was too enormous, too earth-shattering. What are you saying? I breathed. David looked me straight in the eye. His voice was steady now, filled with a terrible certainty. I'm saying our father knew. Mark is not his biological son. I was speechless. My mind reeled, trying to grasp the implications. Mark. The man obsessed with his name, his legacy, his bloodline. The man who was trying to disinherit his own son over a question of paternity. He wasn't a Westwood at all. The entire foundation of his life, of Eleanor's life, was a lie. Your mother? I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence. She had an affair, David said flatly. A long time ago. My father knew, or at least he suspected, but he raised Mark as his own. He never treated him any differently. He loved him, but he knew, and he left me the proof. Where is it? I asked, my voice urgent. The letter. Do you still have it? He nodded. I have it. I've kept it hidden for 10 years. I never knew what to do with it. It felt too cruel. To destroy Mark's life like that. To destroy my mother. She is trying to destroy my son, I said, my voice like steel. She is trying to destroy me. They started this, David. They are the ones who made paternity the issue. They don't deserve your protection, not anymore. He stared at me, his internal conflict written all over his face. He was a good man, a kind man. He didn't want to cause this kind of pain, but he also knew what was right. You're right, he said, his voice firming with resolve. You're right. She's gone too far. This has to stop. Can you get me the letter? I asked. I can, he said. It's in a safe deposit box. It will take me a day or so. And the trust document, I said, my mind racing. What does it say about a beneficiary who is not a biological heir? David's eyes widened as he understood what I was asking. I don't know, he said. I never thought to look. The paternity proviso was always about the next generation. No one ever imagined it could apply to one of us. We need to find out, I said. We need a copy of that trust document. The full thing. I have one, he said. It's at my apartment. My father gave us both copies when he set it up. We spent the next hour poring over David's copy of the trust document. We found the clause. It was buried deep in the appendices, a section on beneficiary eligibility. It was written in dense, dry legalese, but the meaning was clear. If a primary beneficiary was discovered not to be a biological descendant of the grantor, his father, they would be immediately and irrevocably disqualified from the trust. Their entire share, past, present, and future, would be forfeited and redistributed among the remaining legitimate heirs. It was a weapon of unimaginable power. Eleanor, in her obsessive quest to protect a pure bloodline, had created the very tool that could destroy her and the son she was trying to protect. The irony was staggering. She'll be ruined, David whispered, staring at the page. Mark will lose everything. The company shares, the properties, everything he's built his identity on. He built his identity on a lie, I said coldly, and he used that lie to try and hurt my son. This is not about revenge, David. This is about justice. And it's about protecting Alex. He looked at me and nodded slowly. I know. I'll get you the letter. I left the gallery feeling like a different person. The fear and despair were gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I had the truth. I had the weapon. All I needed now was the right moment to use it. The next 2 days were a blur of nervous energy. I spoke to Catherine, my lawyer, and explained the new development. She was silent for a long moment, then let out a low whistle. "My God, Clara," she said. "This is it. This is the whole game. Don't do anything until you have that letter in your hands. And don't breathe a word of this to anyone. Not even Alex." I agreed. It was too big, too explosive. I didn't want to give Alex that kind of hope until I was sure. I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner. I watched a movie with Alex, but my mind was constantly churning. I was planning the confrontation. I was imagining the looks on their faces. Mark, with his arrogant pride. Eleanor, with her smug superiority. I was going to shatter their world, and I was going to enjoy it. On the third day, David called. "I have it," he said, his voice tense. "Meet me at the gallery in an hour. Come alone." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. I drove to the gallery, my hands gripping the steering wheel. David was waiting for me in his office. He looked pale. He slid a thick envelope across the desk towards me. "This is it," he said. The original letter from the doctor and my father's sworn affidavit stating that he had the tests done. It's all notarized. It's legally binding. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. It was all there. The lab results, the genetic markers, the cold, scientific proof that Mark Westwood was not the son of the man whose name he carried. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I looked up at him. "This must be so hard for you." He gave me a sad smile. My father raised Mark as his son. In his heart, he was his son. But he also believed in truth. And he knew my mother. He knew what she was capable of. I think he left this for a day like today. He was protecting the family from her, even after he was gone. He was right. This wasn't just about me and Alex. This was about freeing the entire family from Eleanor's toxic grip. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to end it," I said. "Tonight." I went home and called Mark. He answered immediately, his voice impatient. "What is it, Clara? Has your lawyer been in touch? We need to schedule this test." "There's been a change of plans," I said, my voice cool and steady. "I want a family meeting. Tonight? At the house." "I told you I'm not meeting without my mother," he snapped. "Good," I said. "I want her there. I want you both there, and I want Alex there." There was a suspicious pause. "Why? What is this about?" "It's about the truth," I said, echoing his own words back at him. "The real truth. You wanted to talk about paternity, Mark. So let's talk about it. Be here at 8 o'clock. And don't be late." I hung up before he could argue. I found Alex in his room, listening to music. I sat on his bed. "I've called a meeting," I said, "with your father and grandmother. Here, tonight." He took his headphones off, his expression wary. "Why, I thought we were doing the test." "We are," I said, "but first I have something I need to say to them, and I want you to be there to hear it. I need you to be my witness." "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "You seem different." "I am different," I said. "I know why they did this, and I know how to stop them." I took his hand. "Can you trust me? Just for a few more hours?" He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, Mom. I trust you." At 10 minutes to 8, the doorbell rang. My heart gave a lurch, but I took a deep, calming breath. I was ready. I had the envelope with the letters in my purse. I had Catherine on standby, ready for my call. I had David waiting for my signal. I was in control. I opened the door. Mark and Eleanor stood on the porch. They looked confident. Smug, even. They thought they had me cornered. They thought this was my surrender. "Clara," Eleanor said, sweeping past me into the house. "I'm glad you've come to your senses. A private discussion is so much more civilized." Mark followed her in, his eyes scanning the living room. "Where's Alex?" he asked. "He'll be down in a minute," I said, closing the door. "Please sit down." They sat on the sofa, side by side, a united front of arrogance. I remained standing, facing them. The power dynamic in the room was already different. They were the guests. I was the host. Alex came down the stairs and stood beside me, his arms crossed over his chest. He gave his father and grandmother a cold, hard look. "All right, Clara," Mark said impatiently. "We're all here. What is this about? Are you ready to confess?" I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "Oh, I'm not the one who will be confessing tonight, Mark." I walked over to the coffee table and placed my purse on it. I looked from Mark's impatient face to Eleanor's condescending one. I let the silence hang in the air, building the tension. "You wanted to talk about paternity," I began, my voice calm and measured. "You made a very public claim that Alex is not your son. You did this because you and your mother are trying to trigger the paternity proviso in the Westwood Family Trust. You are trying to have Alex disinherited so you can claim his share of the final distribution on your 50th birthday. The blood drained from Mark's face. Eleanor's smug expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of alarm. They were not expecting me to know the details of their plan. "That's a ridiculous accusation," Eleanor snapped, recovering quickly. "We are concerned about the integrity of the family line. That is all." "Is it?" I said, my gaze locking onto hers. "Because you seem to have a very selective concern for the family line, Eleanor. You hold everyone else to an impossible standard. But you have a secret, don't you? A very big one." She paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick envelope. I held it up. "You based your entire attack on me on a lie. You assumed I had been unfaithful. You assumed I had a secret. But the truth is, the biggest secret in this family belongs to you." I turned to Mark. His eyes were wide, darting from the envelope to his mother's terrified face. "You have spent your whole life trying to live up to the Westwood name, haven't you, Mark? Trying to be the perfect son, the perfect heir. You were willing to sacrifice your own child for that name." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "The terrible irony," I continued, my voice dropping, "is that the name isn't yours to claim." "What are you talking about?" Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. I opened the envelope and took out the letter from the doctor and the affidavit from his father. "Your father, the man who raised you, had a rare genetic marker," I said, my voice clear and steady. "A marker that he passed on to his biological children. He passed it on to David." I held up the lab report. "But he didn't pass it on to you, Mark, because he couldn't. This is a letter from a geneticist confirming it. And this," I held up the second document, "is a sworn affidavit from your father, acknowledging the results of the test. He knew. He knew you were not his biological son." The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the frantic, ragged breathing of Eleanor. Mark stared at the papers in my hand, his face a mask of utter disbelief. He looked like a man who had been shot. "No," he breathed. "No, that's a lie. It's a forgery." He turned to his mother, his eyes pleading. "Mother, tell her it's a lie." Eleanor was as white as a sheet. She stared at the papers, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. No words came out. Her silence was the only confession I needed. "She can't, can she?" I said softly. "She can't deny it, because it's the truth. Your whole life, your precious legacy, it's all been a lie. A lie she told to cover up her own affair." Alex, who had been standing beside me in stunned silence, let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "So you were going to disown me," he said, his voice dripping with contempt as he looked at Mark. "For not being a real Westwood? And you're not even one yourself?" The hypocrisy of it all, laid bare in the quiet living room, was devastating. Mark stumbled back as if he had been physically struck. He sank onto the arm of the sofa, his head in his hands. "And you know the best part, Eleanor?" I said, turning my full attention to the woman who had started all of this. "Your obsession with bloodlines? You wrote it into the trust yourself. I had my lawyer review it this afternoon. The clause about beneficiary eligibility. If a primary beneficiary is found not to be a biological descendant, they are immediately disqualified. They forfeit everything." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with pure terror. She finally understood. She had not just been exposed, she had been ruined. By her own hand. "Mark loses everything," I said, spelling it out for her in the most brutal terms. "The company, the trust fund, the houses, everything he thought was his birthright. It's all gone. Because of you. Because of your lie. And because of your greed." I looked at my husband, the broken man hunched on the sofa. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a kind of grim satisfaction. He had tried to make me small. He had tried to take my son from me. And in the end, he had lost himself. "I will be filing for divorce in the morning," I said, my voice calm. "And I will be taking half of everything that is legally mine, which, as it turns out, is half of nothing. But that's fine. I have my son, and I have my dignity. What do you have, Mark?" He didn't answer. He just sat there, rocking back and forth, a hollowed-out shell of the arrogant man he had been just an hour before. Eleanor finally found her voice. It was a hoarse, desperate whisper. "Please, Clara, don't do this. We can fix this. We can make an arrangement." "An arrangement?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "You want to make a deal now? After you tried to destroy my life? After you tried to brand my son as illegitimate for money?" "There are no more deals, Eleanor. The time for deals is over. Now is the time for consequences." I walked over to the phone and picked it up. "My lawyer is waiting for my call," I said, looking at her. "So is David. He is the sole remaining legitimate heir to the Westwood Trust. I imagine he and his lawyers will be very interested to see these documents. They will be taking control of the estate, effective immediately." Eleanor let out a choked sob. The sound was ugly and raw. It was the sound of a queen watching her kingdom crumble to dust. I looked at Alex. He was watching them, not with hatred, but with a kind of weary sadness. He had seen his father and grandmother for who they really were, and it was a pathetic sight. "I think you should go now," I said to them, my voice devoid of any emotion. "There's nothing left to say." Mark didn't move. He seemed catatonic. Eleanor, however, scrambled to her feet. She grabbed her son's arm, trying to pull him up. "Mark, we have to go. We have to call our lawyer." He looked up at her, his eyes vacant. "It's over," he mumbled. "It's all over." She finally managed to haul him to his feet. She practically dragged him to the door, a fallen monarch leading her broken prince into exile. At the door, she turned back to me, her face a twisted mask of hatred. "You will regret this," she spat. "No," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "You will." I closed the door behind them and locked it. The silence that descended on the house was profound. It was the silence of a battle won, of a long, terrible storm that had finally passed. I turned to Alex. He was just standing there looking at the door. I walked over and put my arms around him. He leaned into me, his body trembling slightly. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I whispered. He pulled back and looked at me. His eyes were clear. "Don't be," he said, his voice firm. "I needed to see that. I needed to see what they really are." He managed a small, wry smile. "So, I guess this means I don't have to go to Grandma's for Christmas this year." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It felt like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. "No," I said. "You never have to go to Grandma's for Christmas again." We stood there for a moment in the quiet house. Our house. "What happens now?" he asked. Now, I said, taking his hand. We start over, just the two of us. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal activity. Catherine, my lawyer, was ruthless and efficient. She filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning. She also contacted David's legal team and provided them with copies of the letters and the trust documents. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Mark and Eleanor. The trustees of the Westwood Family Trust, minus Eleanor, who was immediately removed, held an emergency meeting. Faced with the undeniable proof from their own founder, they had no choice but to enforce the terms of the trust. Mark was officially disqualified. All his assets that were tied to the trust, which was nearly everything, were frozen. He was given notice to vacate the company headquarters. He was, in an instant, stripped of his wealth, his power, and his identity. David, as the sole remaining heir, took control. He called me a few days later. His voice was strained but resolute. "It's done," he said. "They're out. Completely. The lawyers are saying it's one of the most airtight disinheritance clauses they've ever seen. My mother built her own prison." "How is he?" I asked. I didn't really care, but it felt like a question I should ask. "Broken," David said bluntly. "He's staying with her. She's trying to fight it, of course. Hiring lawyers, claiming the documents are fraudulent, but it's hopeless. The proof is absolute. She's just throwing good money after bad. Or what little money she has left that wasn't tied to my father." "And you?" I asked. "How are you?" "Overwhelmed," he admitted. I never wanted this, to run a real estate empire. But I'm also free. For the first time in my life, I'm not living in Mark's shadow or under my mother's thumb. I can do some good with this, Clara. I'm going to set up a foundation, an arts foundation, in my father's name, the real one. I smiled. He would have liked that. I paused, then asked the question that had been hovering in the back of my mind. "David, what about Alex?" "I already talked to my lawyers," he said, his voice warm. "As soon as your divorce from Mark is final, I'm going to legally adopt him." I was stunned. "What?" "Not as a son," he clarified quickly, "but as my heir. I'm going to amend the trust. I'm making him my sole beneficiary. The Westwood legacy, the real one, will be his. It's what my father would have wanted. He loved Alex." Tears welled in my eyes. It was a gesture of such profound kindness and justice that it took my breath away. "David, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he said gently. "Just tell Alex that his uncle loves him, and that he never has to worry about his future again." The divorce proceeded quickly. With no assets left to fight over, Mark had no leverage. He didn't show up to the hearings. He was represented by a cheap lawyer who seemed as defeated as he was. I walked away with the house. It was in my name, a gift from my parents years ago, and my own savings, which I had thankfully kept separate. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. It was a start. A few weeks later, I was packing up Mark's things from the home office. I was putting old papers into a box when Alex walked in. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to the thick leather folder for the Westwood Family Trust. "A bad memory," I said, tossing it into the box. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, we never did that DNA test." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "No, we didn't." "Do you want to?" he asked. "I mean, just so we know? For sure?" I thought about it. I thought about the lie that had started all of this, the question of his paternity. In the end, it had been a ghost, a distraction from the real betrayal. "It doesn't matter to me, Alex," I said honestly. "You are my son. That's the only truth that I care about. But if it matters to you, if you need that peace of mind, then we'll do it." He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "No," he said. "It doesn't matter to me either. I know who my family is." He looked at me, his eyes full of love and a newfound maturity. "It's you." I never saw Eleanor again. I heard through David that she became a recluse, a bitter old woman living in a much smaller house, her social standing gone, her power evaporated. Mark, I heard, took a low-level sales job in another state. He never tried to contact Alex. He had erased himself from our lives as completely as he had tried to erase our son. One evening, about a year later, Alex and I were sitting on the porch of our quiet house. The air was warm. The neighborhood was peaceful. He was telling me about his plans to use some of the funds from the trust to start a small music program for underprivileged kids. He was full of life, of purpose. He was happy. You know, I said, looking out at the twilight, your father did me a favor that night. Alex looked at me, surprised. What are you talking about? He tried to destroy you. He did, I agreed, but he also set me free. I spent 25 years trying to be the perfect wife, trying to keep the peace, trying to earn the approval of people who were never going to give it. I was living in a cage and I didn't even know it. I turned to him, my heart full. He thought our son wasn't his, but the real truth is, that whole life wasn't mine. This is real. He smiled and reached over, squeezing my hand. We sat there in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the sky. The war was over. The ghosts were gone. And in the quiet aftermath, we had found our real legacy. Not one of blood or money, but one of love, resilience, and the simple, powerful truth of who we chose to be. They had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they had only given me back myself. And they had finally learned what it feels like to be small.